positive cash flow property in Australia, all of Australia. How do you find it? What you're looking for, as in what are you looking for, the key factors to create that cash flow? Do you have to forgo growth? And how do you secure that deal? That's what all this video is about. My name is Helen Tarrant. I help everyday Australians become wealthy and retire financially free through investing in commercial property. And today I'm going to share with you, after doing hours of research and actually scouring on the internet, but looking at off-market deals, and of course through our buyers agency, where you can find the best cash flow properties in all around Australia. So let's get started. So you want to find the best cash flow property in Australia. Now, best cash flow, we're looking at after outgoings, after paying the bank, you have money in hand. So what that means is that you are buying a property that is going to give you cash flow from day one. So it has a tenant already. And now that's the fundamental difference between residential versus commercial, is that residential property are typically negative or neutral when you start, and it takes years to build up that real positive cash flow. So I'm talking about $500, $700, $1,000 a week in positive cash flow versus getting a commercial property where from day one you're getting positive cash flow. Now, how much positive cash flow depends on where you're going to invest, and that's what I'm going to share with you in this video. And if you stay to the end, I'm actually going to share with some quick tips for you to quick launch, finding something within 60 to 90 minute drive of where you live, right? So that's the fundamental difference. A big difference also with residential with commercial is that in commercial, the tenant pays for your outgoings, which means that there is more money coming to your pocket. So yes, they pay for management. Yes, they pay for land tax. Yes, they pay for insurance. They pay for all of those things so that you actually have less out-of-pocket expenses. They even pay for minor maintenance. And if you get something like a childcare, petrol station, or something like a logistics center or like your McDonald's, they even pay for the capital works. So it is really set and forget. And that's why people transition to commercial, because you can actually retire in half the time through investing in commercial versus in residential. So where do you find that positive cash flow? How does that work? Let's work the numbers first, and then I'm going to share with you how you can find it. So for example, you've got $400,000 in cash deposit as a deposit, right? And you may have 200, you may have 300, you might have 600,000, but I'm just using $1 million purchase as an example here. 400K buys you $1 million property on a lease stock loan, where it's not dependent on you for servicing, because in commercial we've got this magic loan called lease stock where it's not dependent on you for servicing. It's dependent on the actual lease itself for servicing. So $400,000 buy $1 million property. It works at 65% LVR. Sometimes the bank will give you 70%, 65% LVR. And so you're putting in $350,000 as deposit and $50,000 for your cost of stamp duty, legals, etc. It doesn't include any buyer's agency fees or anything, but that is the basic for you to get into a deal. Now, if you go to regional, and I'm talking about large regional towns over 50,000 in population with some real key drivers, so not just a single town that's mining or tourism, but it might have a combination of health, it might have a combination of like the army, it might have a combination of local tourism plus industrial plus maybe agriculture, like a mixture of that economic drive. So you've got really good replaceable tenants, and there's versatility in that economy. And what happens is then you're borrowing $650,000 against $1 million, or if you can service, or if you're in a different situation, commercial property can go up to 80% in its loans. But let's look at that. That means your repayment is around that $40,000 to $45,000 per year on interest only. Now in commercial, we do interest only payments because you get the cash flow and you want to accumulate and save up for the next deposit. And as the growth of your property happens, your LVR naturally lower, so you don't have to worry about paying principal, which is another great thing about commercial property. So you put in 400K, you're getting $70,000 net rent after all outgoings. Yes, that means management fees being paid for, that means land tax, all of those things being paid for. $70,000 comes in, you pay $45,000 in terms of your loan, and you got $25,000 in cash flow. That's $500 a week, pure cash flow coming into your pockets, right? That's also a great cash return on the 400K you put into the deal as well. Now, you might be saying, well, what happens if I have equity? If I have equity, how do I get that instant cash flow? Where do I look for that instant cash flow? Now, going regional is the number one way to get cash flow. But you can also get cash flow by engineering it in metro areas. So you could be buying in on a property that might be 5% yield, that breaks even, and it could be neutral right now because interest rate is coming down. So imagine that you went, instead of going regional, you go into a large metro area. So it could be Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Gold Coast, any of those areas, Adelaide, ACT, any of those metro areas, and you are buying $1 million property, say $1 million property, but now that property is only giving you $50,000 in income after all the outgoings, right? But the rent is under market. The rent the tenant is paying is below what the average is. And it's typically, you need to find a property that the tenant's below market by about 20 to 30%, right? And that you have an opportunity. It's also not a huge long list. You have a lease with that tenant for maybe only the next 18 to 24 months, so a shorter lease term. That gives you the ability to later on increase that rent up by about 20% in a short space of time. So you won't get instant cash flow straight away. So let's say you're repaying the bank $45,000, you're only getting $50,000, you're only getting $5,000 a year, right? $100 a week, not a huge deal, right? But you have the ability of able to change that rent later on so that you could get $20,000 or $10,000 more from that same tenant or a new tenant when you change the tenant or re-sign a lease. Now, that's an excellent way in the city to actually get the cash flow, but just a little bit of delayed gratification getting that cash flow, but then to also get the growth, because with that cash flow comes growth as well. So we've got these options that you have in commercial where you can get instant cash flow by going to regional areas and you get that instant cash flow, or you go to the metro areas and you get a lower cash flow but with ability to manufacture that cash flow in the future. Now, if you're doing 100% borrowings, you have to go regional because that allows you to break even on everything and still give you a little bit of cash flow. So you might start out, if it's 100% borrowed, draw down from equity from your residential property or another commercial property, and you're borrowing again, you might break even and make $5,000 in positive cash flow, but that's still really good. Imagine doing 100% or 105%, including stamp duty, in borrowings in a residential property, how much you'd be negative by, right? In commercial, you can get all of that money paid for, plus about $5,000 back. But in time, as the interest rates come down, you're going to have more and more cash flow. Over the next 2 years, your 5K could grow to 10 to 15K, especially if you have the ability to tweak one or two of the rents or the market rent is higher. So if you really want the trifecta effect to find the best yielding cash flow property in all around Australia, go to a large regional town, find a property that is under market value, buy it at the correct market yield at the time, have the ability to increase that cash flow by at least 1 to 1.5%. So your 7% goes to 8.5. That naturally, even on 100% finance, adds an extra $10,000 in rent on every million to your bottom line. And since your repayments to the bank is exactly the same, that 1% directly adds to your cash flow. So you might start out at $5,000 a year, but it might end up being 10, 15, 20 grand over a 2-year period. And that's how you get the massive amounts of cash flow that helps you buy the second property, right? So if you are looking for that deal and you want to know where you can find it, hit the subscribe button and the bell. Click the link below. Join us in one of our upcoming free seminars, online and in person, so that you can find out more about investing in commercial property and how you can build a portfolio in half the time as you would in residential through commercial, and how you can retire financially free just so much faster. I'm going to give you my 3 quick tips as I finish off to let you know how you can find that property right now in around you. Firstly, expand your search, right? If you're comfortable in Sydney, you need to go 1 or 2 hours outside of Sydney. So if you're comfortable in Melbourne, you need to go 1 or 2 hours outside of Melbourne. Same wherever you are in that in your metro area. So that encompasses fringe city as well as the beginning of regional, right? Those are the areas where the yields and the returns and cash flow changes the most, right? You can go from a property that you could get extra 0.5% more than the market here or there, right? So that's the best little bracket that I find. Number 2 is go and try to get at least 0.25% better than the market. Find out, do your research. This is where the research really is important in those areas. Talk to your agents, look at the previous sales, look at the listing and leasings, look at all of that and work out if you could get in your first deal just 0.25% more than the rest of the market. So if the cap rate, which is the market benchmark for that particular property, let's say it's 6 or 6.5%, if you could get 6.75, you could get 6.8 or even 6.6%, right? Just a little bit ahead of the market, it compounds itself over time, right? Also, look for properties that have a little bit more extra you can add to it, just in a little bit, not for something that, you want to knock down, rebuild, change of use, not those. Can you add a storage shed? Can you add an ATM? Can you add solar panels? Can you do an extension? What else can you do that the tenant may want more of or may be missing? Could you have a huge amount of car space? Just put a couple of shipping containers in there that adds a few $1,000s a year to your cash flow. Could you do that, right? They all incrementally add. And the compounding nature of cash flow on cash flow and cash flow and increases per year starts to add to your bottom line. And all of a sudden you wake up with a property that starts to produce a lot of cash flow. So finding the best cash flow properties in Australia is not about luck, not about looking for the needle in the haystack. It's about having strategy. With strategy, you can build a faster portfolio. You can wealth hack your way into creating financial freedom in a short space of time. And if you want to find out more about how that happens, click the link below, join us for one of our upcoming events, and book in for one of our free strategy sessions.